Recovery is possible.
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 Recovery dialogues and sober stories.
Nearly 80% of adults in recovery, whether from addiction, a mental health condition, or both, report feeling deeply lonely. And yet nobody puts learn how to connect with people again on a treatment plan. I'm Antonio Matta, peer specialist, storyteller, and your host. This is Recovery Dialogues and Sober Stories, where lived experience, clinical insight, and real research come together to challenge stigma, inspire change, and prove that recovery is possible, one conversation at a time. Before we get into today's episode, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, City Voices. City Voices is a peer-run mental health organization whose mission is exactly what it sounds like: bringing smiles to people on their mental health journey through real community, peer-led programs, and spaces where healing and connection actually happen. I'll tell you more about what they're doing a little later in the episode. Now, let's get into today's topic. There's something nobody really talks about when we talk about recovery. We talk about meetings, we talk about triggers, we talk about relapse prevention, sobriety milestone, medication management, all important things. But somewhere along the way, one of the hardest parts of getting better gets skipped over almost entirely: building new relationships. And I don't just mean romantic ones. I mean friendships, family repair, learning to trust again, learning to let someone in when your whole system, your mind, your nervous system, your history is quietly screaming that connection is dangerous. If you're living with a mental health condition, a substance use disorder, or both, this topic hits differently. And today, we're going to sit with it honestly. We're going to name the real challenges, the ones that don't make it onto motivational posters. And we're going to talk about what the research actually says you can do about it. Because there are things you can do. Real, proven things. And that's where this conversation is going. Let's start with why this is so hard. And I want to be clear, if you've struggled to form or maintain healthy relationships during your recovery, that's not a character flaw. That's not weakness. That is a very predictable, very documented response to what your brain and your body have been through. Research tells us that addiction and many mental health conditions actually affect the same brain systems responsible for bonding. The systems that regulate oxytocin and dopamine, the chemicals most associated with connection, trust, and attachment. When those systems have been rerouted by substances or destabilized by mental illness, relationships don't just feel hard, they feel foreign. And for many people, dangerous. Studies on attachment show that insecure attachment, meaning difficulty trusting, difficulty feeling safe in close relationships, is both a risk factor for substance use disorder and something that gets worse the deeper into active addiction a person goes. So by the time someone gets to recovery, they're often working with a nervous system that has been trained over years to associate closeness with pain. Add to that the reality of trauma. Many people living with co-occurring disorders, meaning both a mental health condition and a substance use disorder at the same time, carry significant trauma histories. And complex trauma doesn't just leave emotional scars. It creates a pattern where a person desperately wants connection while simultaneously feeling overwhelmed the moment they actually have it, reaching for someone and pulling back, longing for closeness and then self-sabotaging once it arrives. And then there's loneliness, which in this population is nearly universal. Research found that among adults in residential treatment, nearly 80% reported feeling lonely at least once per month. And for about 70%, it was a serious, ongoing problem. That's not a small thing. Chronic loneliness has been shown to increase the risk of mortality by comparable margins to smoking. It's a public health issue, and it's also one of the most reliable predictors of setback, whether that's returning to use, a depressive episode, or a crisis in mental health stability. So you have this painful cycle. Mental health episodes and substance use both erode relationships. Shame and stigma drive isolation. Isolation deepens the craving for substances, for relief, for anything that makes the pain quieter. And the hardest part is that the very thing that would help most, genuine human connection, feels like the most threatening thing in the world. Now, here's where it gets even more specific. There's also the question of stigma and disclosure. When you're navigating mental health challenges or addiction recovery, there's always this calculation running in the background. Do I tell this person? How much do I share? What if they leave when they find out? That fear is real. Stigma, the kind that gets directed at you, the kind you anticipate from others, and the kind you eventually turn on yourself, creates a trap. Concealing your history protects you from discrimination, but blocks the very intimacy and support that recovery depends on. Research on disclosure shows that people who have more positive attitudes toward sharing their story, especially with trusted family members, report lower self-stigma and better quality of life and recovery outcomes. Opening up, carefully and intentionally, tends to help more than it hurts. But it takes skill, it takes trust, and it takes time. Then there's the first year guidance, that clinical folk wisdom that says, don't start new romantic relationships in the first year of recovery. And while it's most often discussed in addiction circles, it applies just as meaningfully to mental health recovery. When you're still learning to regulate your emotions, stabilize your mood, or manage episodes of a condition that shows up in waves, early relationship stress becomes a serious destabilizer. New romance can fill a void that recovery needs to sit with. And when that relationship falls apart, which is more likely when both people are still early in healing, the grief of it can pull someone back under. It's not a law. There are exceptions. But it's wisdom worth sitting with, whatever your recovery looks like. And finally, codependency. This one's important. Many people navigating addiction or mental health recovery fall into patterns marked by losing themselves in another person's needs, fear of abandonment, deriving all self-worth from being needed. Those patterns are usually trauma adaptations. They made sense at some point, but they don't sustain healthy relationships. The clinical goal isn't to build walls. It's to develop what researchers call interdependence, the capacity to be open and to be boundaried, both. Think of it like a drawbridge, not permanently raised, not permanently lowered, responsive. I want to pause here and check in with you because this is a lot to sit with. If you're hearing your own story somewhere in what I'm describing, I want to acknowledge something. The fact that you're still here, still trying, still listening to something like this says more about your resilience than any of the hard stuff you've been through says about your worth. And speaking of organizations that understand that, I want to bring up our sponsor again, City Voices. City Voices runs a number of programs designed specifically to address what we've been talking about: isolation, loneliness, and the need for real, safe human connection. Their initiatives include Peer Workers United, a peer-led support group for certified peer specialists and recovery coaches. They run social media outreach that connects people through mental health and healing content. They have events like comedy nights and variety shows because laughter and joy are part of healing too. They also offer self-compassion and self-love exercises and promote social connection through outdoor activities and group experiences. And all of it is built on a foundation of peer support. People with lived experience showing up for each other. That's not incidental to recovery. According to SAMHSA, peer support is one of the 6 core principles of a trauma-informed approach to care. It's a vehicle for establishing safety and hope, building trust, and using lived experience to promote healing. City Voices embeds that into everything they do. So what do you actually do with all of this? Let's get practical. First, start with peer community, not romance. The research is consistent here. The relationships that tend to be most helpful in early recovery are not romantic ones. They're peer relationships. Recovery groups, community centers, group therapy, online forums filled with people who've been where you are. One study that followed people in sustained recovery found that the relationships most responsible for initiating and sustaining change were connections with peers, caring service providers, and siblings. Connection, not willpower, was the turning point. Start there. Build the foundation before you build the house. Second, practice the skill called opposite action. This comes from dialectical behavior therapy, and it's exactly what it sounds like. When your impulse is to isolate, do the opposite. Reach out, even if it's just a text, even if it's awkward, even if you don't know what to say. The nervous system learns safety through repeated, gentle exposure to safe connection. You can't think your way into trusting people. You have to practice it in small, survivable doses. Third, learn to set boundaries without building walls. Boundaries in recovery aren't about keeping people out. They're about knowing where you end and someone else begins. The drawbridge metaphor is useful here. You get to choose when to open, when to protect, and when to let someone in. That flexibility, that capacity to discern, is a skill, and it's learnable. DBT's interpersonal effectiveness module offers tools like the Dear Man skill, which gives you a concrete structure for making requests and setting limits without blowing up the relationship or swallowing your needs entirely. Fourth, be strategic about disclosure. You don't owe your entire history to everyone you meet. Research suggests that sharing with trusted people, particularly family, is associated with better outcomes. But disclosure is a skill, not an obligation. Think about who has earned the right to hear your story. Start small. Build trust incrementally. When someone shows you over time that they can hold what you share, that's when you go deeper. And fifth, recognize codependency for what it is, without shame. If you find yourself losing your sense of self in relationships, tolerating things you shouldn't, or measuring your worth entirely by how much someone needs you, that's not love. That's a trauma adaptation that learned to look like love. It can be unlearned. Therapy, support groups, and honest reflection can help you move from that pattern toward genuine interdependence, where two whole people choose each other, rather than two incomplete people holding each other up. Let's bring it home. What we covered today. The reason building new relationships is so hard in mental health and addiction recovery is not a personal failing. It's rooted in the neurobiology of bonding, trauma histories, the isolation addiction cycle, and the very real risks that come with connection in early recovery. We talked about stigma, disclosure, the first-year guidance, and codependency. And we talked about what to do. Start with peer community. Practice opposite action. Reach out when you want to disappear. Learn the difference between a wall and a boundary. Share your story strategically with people who've earned it. And recognize codependency as a pattern you can change, not a permanent identity. Here's the big picture takeaway. Recovery itself is a relationship school. The honesty, the consistency, the willingness to ask for help and show up even when it's uncomfortable. Those are exactly the skills healthy relationships are built on. Research shows that people in sustained recovery often become better at relationships than they were before, not despite what they've been through, because of what they've learned. Before I close, I want to share two things with you. The first is about city voices. If anything in today's conversation resonated with you, that need for community, for connection, for a space where your experience is honored, City Voices is building something worth being a part of. Right now, they have a fundraiser running to build a stronger, broader community for people on their mental health journey. Every gift is tax-deductible through FJC. You can donate at givebetter.com/donate-to-city-voices. I'll put that in the show notes. They're doing real, meaningful work, and your support helps them do more of it. The second is about this show and what comes next. The full season hasn't launched yet, but the back catalog is there. And if you haven't explored past episodes, now is a good time. There's a lot we've already covered on Recovery Dialogues and Sober Stories that connects directly to what we talked about today. And if there's something you want me to dig into, a topic that keeps you up at night, a question you haven't found a good answer to, something you think deserves a real, honest conversation, reach out. Email me or DM me on social media, or head over to the official website at www.recoverydialogues-soberstories.show. I read everything. Your voice shapes this show. If today's episode added something to your life, consider supporting what makes it possible. Even a $1 contribution to the show's GoFundMe at gofundme.com/recoverydialogues makes a difference. You can also leave a review, share this episode with someone who needs it, or support the show by visiting www.recoverydialogues.com, where you'll find teas, hoodies, joggers, mugs, totes, and more. Over 14 new designs were recently added to the store. Merch with meaning. Every purchase is a way of saying, this work matters. If there's an organization out there whose mission aligns with honest, stigma-free conversations about recovery and mental health, I'd love to hear from you about sponsorship. This show is a platform for the work you're doing. Let's broaden your reach together. And to everyone listening, wherever you are in this process, I'll leave you with this. Healing isn't a straight line, and connection isn't always comfortable. But the version of you that exists on the other side of this work, more grounded, more honest, more capable of both giving and receiving love, that version of you is not a fantasy. It's what the research calls earned security, and it's yours to build. So do the work, however that looks for you today. Whether it's one honest conversation, one meeting, one text you almost didn't send. A better quality of life isn't waiting for you at some distant finish line. It's being assembled, piece by piece, in moments exactly like the ones you're choosing right now. Take care of yourselves and each other. Until next time.
Recovery is possible.
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 Recovery dialogues and sober stories.